I'd like to welcome Ron now on stage, a guru in the Bay Area, somebody that everybody believes in already and listens to him, and who's now become a great friend of mine, Dr. Ron Sinha.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Truly appreciate that. So, I want to tell you a story about myself. When you look up at this slide, you'll see a picture of myself and my brother, my older brother, who's 8 years older than me. And you can kind of think of myself as being the conformer or the good Indian son, and my brother was the rebel. You can see me wearing a shiny white coat. I followed my father's footsteps into a career of medicine. My brother rejected that demand from my dad and didn't want to follow medicine at all. I married a very nice Indian girl. She's out there at the table. And my brother married a French woman. And that was a big scandal in our household at that time. Okay? I settled close to home in California, and my brother eventually fled to Paris to settle down with his family. So at that time, those decisions by my brother caused a lot of stress in our family. But when I reflect on our lives, I think about the fact that most of the decisions that I've made throughout my life were made with my head. Well, when he made his decisions, he really followed his heart. Going into medicine actually intensified that ability and that tendency to use my brain. I followed a lot of evidence-based guidelines, algorithms, and protocols to treat my patients. I learned to use tools like a stethoscope to listen to my patients' hearts. But I actually didn't learn how to connect directly to my patients' hearts because I didn't understand my own heart. And then something changed. So what happened to me was, even with my own lifestyle, I started following strict nutrition guidelines and exercise guidelines, and I developed a condition called metabolic syndrome, which is the leading cause of heart disease globally. Those are my lab results up there. And this is despite exercising and doing everything by the book. But I also started seeing this trend in my patients. They were following the rules, they meant well, and they were doing everything by the protocol, and they were still suffering with a lot of conditions. So for the first time, I had to step outside of my own algorithm and really figure out what the heck was going on. And this really involved looking at cutting-edge research, but what it also involved was looking at people like my grandmother, okay? So ancestral wisdom. You know, I realized a lot of the things that my ancestors did were done intuitively. They didn't have to wear devices and apps, but they knew what to do. So the combination of that ancestral wisdom and cutting-edge science really is what was the foundation of my book and the work that I do today. So my patients also follow a lot of rules and protocols, and often they're based on aphorisms, like eat breakfast like a king. I always hear that from my patients. And I wanted to give you the example of how this can sometimes be a fallacy. Let's take King Henry VIII on the left there. He was close to 400 pounds when he died, surely diabetic. He was a gluttonous king. He would wake up in the morning, ring a bell, and any meal would be delivered to him at any time. On the right, you see a powerful, athletic, muscular warrior king, right? So now, do both of these kings deserve to wake up in the morning and eat a huge breakfast like a king? And who are we in the center there, right? We don't sit on a throne, but we sit on our office chair most of the day. We don't have a bell, but we can pick up our phone, tap on a few buttons, and our digital servant will deliver any food to us at any time. So when we think about what type of king we become in the modern world, we've got to be careful about aphorisms, because yes, we do need to inherit some traditions from our family, but we can't selectively choose the ones that don't match our metabolic needs, right? So a lot of us haven't really earned the metabolic right to eat breakfast like a king. So now I need to make a confession, okay? So I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a gambler, I'm not a smoker, but I have a disease that I think a lot of you share with me here in the office, in the room right now, and it's I'm a compulsive brainstormer. A lot of times my brain will move on, and this is why I thank Ashish for the gift of transcendental meditation, but I want to talk to you about the fact that I am seeing the health consequences of compulsive brainstorming. So let's talk about a few of these conditions. Number one, this is something I call chronic entrepreneur syndrome. And this is probably the biggest cohort of this that we can possibly have. So these are patients that come in and see me. Their body type, they're athletic or very slender. Their work output is they're usually insanely productive. I mean, they cannot accomplish more in their lives. Their fitness levels, many of them are type A exercisers. They're in phenomenal shape cardiovascularly. Stress levels are very high. It feels normal to them, but they're clearly hyperactive because there's no way they can accomplish so much without functioning at a very stressed out neurological level. And sleep, why do they need more sleep when they're performing so well in the office and they're in great shape? But this, I would not call this a syndrome unless I started seeing this more and more. But this is a typical patient I see in my office. And the problem is they have a type A lifestyle and they have a type A approach to dieting and exercise. And that cumulative stress and inflammation is triggering chronic diseases like heart disease. And really the number one thing they need is not to diet harder, right? Not to exercise harder, but they need rest. And I can relate to this because I've been in this situation before. And that's why the cornerstone, the bookends of the meds program, meditation and sleep, are so vital for this, and I never really paid attention to that in the beginning. Are women, right? So women used to have extended family and so much support when it came to the responsibility of raising families. But now they've become six-armed multitasking avatars who are just overwhelmed with the responsibilities of work, with family, right? And still trying to manage their health. Diabetes and heart disease are major concerns, but what I'm also seeing are hormonal conditions like thyroid dysfunction, adrenal dysfunction. I'm seeing a lot of infertility in young South Asian women. Resistant weight loss, so dieting harder and exercising harder is actually leading to less weight loss, kind of the opposite. I think a lot of women can relate to that. A lot of mental issues like depression, anxiety. And then what I'm also seeing is autoimmune conditions and first-generation cancer, which never existed in the family before. What about our kids, okay? Is your child a startup? And what I mean by that is we are backing our children with intensive time, finances, and resources. We have sky-high expectations about their ROI, right? I know that sounds terrible, right? But for every parent that is dreaming about their child donning a white coat or occupying a corner office without listening to their heart or giving them the time to pay attention to their physical and mental health, we're probably doing more harm than good, right? And the expectations, another thing I want to tell you is right now, one of the things that we fear the most as parents of young kids is our child not going to a prestigious school or getting a great job. But I want you to fast forward 10 to 15 years from now to the world that I live in right now, which is being a parent and getting the news that your child has a chronic health condition like heart disease or diabetes, is struggling with anxiety, depression, has developed cancer, or you've got a daughter that can't have children due to infertility. That's much worse than getting a rejection letter from Stanford. Trust me. And this is becoming the norm. This is really becoming the norm in our community. The only additional extracurricular activity our kids need is extra time to sleep, for God's sake, to take a nap, extra time to rest, to daydream, to play, to be a child, and extra nutrients in their food. I mean, they're being shuttled from activity to activity, given nutrient-deficient foods, and they're not growing or they're becoming overweight. And this is becoming the norm. Socialization. So when I think about my dad was an MD, PhD, and when he would enter a social event, you know, the point I want to make is nowadays socialization has become very productive compared to where it used to be before. So my dad would enter an event, he's an MD, PhD, he would leave his degrees at the door, and he would talk about mundane topics. I remember him talking about an Indian chappal and like telling jokes about that and talking about people's feet and quoting Tagore and Sanskrit, and he would make people laugh from their stomachs. It was so joyous every time he'd enter a social event. And I kind of thought to myself, if my dad told that same story here in Silicon Valley, there would be a half dozen people that think about how can we connect that chappal to a smartphone and measure steps and calories, and maybe we'd call it a smart chappal, and how can we scale that and make as much money as possible, right? By the way, I have the patent on the smart chappal, and I have a non-disclosure agreement with Batak Shoe Company, so don't even think about it, okay? So what protocol? We all have protocols in our lives. What protocol are we following? Is it the higher education great job? Is it start my company? A lot of us have this trained in, but I want to tell you about the top protocol. Higher education great job bliss. One of my jobs is I deal with the top companies in the world and I talk to their HR benefits people. And these are people that have graduated from Stanford. They're working in the greatest companies in the world. They've got luxurious benefits. They're making great money. And when I ask him, what is the number one health claim you're dealing with at these companies? It's mental health disorders like depression and anxiety. What's the number one medication that's being taken out? Antidepressants. right? So you can blame the company. You can say, well, obviously the company's working them too hard, right? That's got to be the problem. But that's short-sighted. It is the protocol that we have driven into ourselves and our kids from an early age, right? The expectation that good enough is not good enough. And that really is what leads to this. You can blame the school where there's a high suicide rate. Is it the school or is it the protocol? The frenetic pace of the protocol where we don't give kids time to grow, to develop, and to take care of their emotional and physical health. So which white coat, right? I am so happy that my brother Robin was not forced into a white doctor's coat. He is the most joyous person you would ever meet. And I know a lot of you are worried that, oh my God, did Ron's brother become an artist starving in the streets of Paris? He actually is a PhD in genetic engineering, and professionally he's very successful. So you can achieve professional success without a hard-driving protocol. He took a very circuitous route in his life, but it was purely heartfelt. And I think that's the route that we can all take and achieve success on every aspect. And what I want to say is the South Asian Heart Center for 10 years has stepped outside traditional algorithms and protocols. They've basically done what it takes to take a culturally tailored program and deliver it to our community with cutting-edge science. And I told you that I was not able to connect to the hearts of my patients until I developed a health condition myself. Well, the dedicated staff at the South Asian Heart Center, every single one of them have been touched directly by heart disease in some way. So when they're in the community at health fairs and they make that phone call, they're in it, 100% heartfelt. And you won't find that anywhere else. So today I want to celebrate their achievements over the last 10 years. And I ask you to please join me in supporting their future because they are saving lives. Thank you very much.